is the 9th of September 2020, and yesterday I read the first part of chapter 8 of the book Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth. It was written by Stuart Holroyd and it was published in 1977, and I have very much been enjoying the books. There's two books. One is called The Only Planet of Choice, and actually this one is the previous to that one, Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, and it describes a journey of what you would now call three light workers: Andrija, Puharich, who is a scientist and a doctor, Sir John Whitmore, who was an aristocrat, and Phyllis Schlemmer, who was a medium. They came from different parts in the world, they met, and it's a fascinating account of the journey through the Middle East, in which they were preventing atomic war. When I saw Kissinger here, I was thinking, wow. Anyway, this is all verifiable, I dare say. And I finished the chapter at page 200 and, did I say 287? Yes, 287. This chapter is entitled Walking on Eggs. And the trio is in a hotel in the Galilei Zohar Hotel, Ein Bokek. That's where they're finding themselves. There was nothing obviously wrong with the wheels or tires of the car when they examined them the next morning, but John drove slowly and with great caution nevertheless. The three of them talked frankly about the previous night's communication and the understandings and feelings they'd got from it. And by the time they reached Jerusalem, they agreed that it had been a good thing because it had had the effect of bringing them closer together. In Jerusalem, they sought a place for their meditation near the parliament buildings, but they could find nowhere very close where they would not be conspicuous, and they had to settle for the grounds of the university, about half a mile from the Knesset. Tom had said that they should get back to Galilee that day, so after the meditation they paid a brief visit to the old city to enable Phyllis to do some shopping, then set off to drive to Tiberias via Ramallah, Nablus and Beit Shean. They bought a copy of an English-language newspaper printed in Jerusalem, which carried the headline PLO plans attack from Syria, and wondered whether this had anything to do with Tom's insisting that they return to Galilee. They arrived back at the Galilee Kinneret in time for dinner, and when a suitable time had elapsed after dinner, they held a brief communication. This day, the 23rd, was the day on which Dr. Kissinger had to concede the failure of his negotiations, and the following morning he flew back to Washington. He had been unable to persuade the Israelis to surrender territory in exchange for Egyptian promises, and he had returned, Tom said, in great sadness. Though, with the failure of the talks, the danger of his assassination had passed. Over the next few days, the world's press was to be fairly unanimously critical of Israel's intransigence, and many commentators spoke of the likelihood of a reopening of hostilities. This was early 1975. The following is how Tom analyzed the situation in the communication held on the night of the 23rd. The nation of Egypt, the night of the 23rd, I can't see which month, March, I think, March, 23rd of March, 1975. The following is how Tom analyzed the situation in the communication held on the night of the 23rd. The nation of Egypt sought to make the nation of Israel bend its knees, and when it could not, it began to lay a plot to involve the other nations. But Egypt did not in truth have in mind to bring the other nations to war. It was more in the way of using a threat. In wanting the nation of Israel to bow its knees, Egypt showed its ignorance. And when Israel would not concede the request of Egypt, the thought was planted that if it would be brought to the attention of the other nations that their God demanded this war, then they could force the knees of the nation of Israel to bend. But through their ignorance, they have set up an explosive situation. It has now been picked up by the nation across from where you are. It is the only idea that could pull all the nations that oppose together. It was only done to bring the nation of Israel to its knees, and it was to be but a bluff, but it had gathered strength, and it must be negated. There is a plot to launch an attack when the holidays of the Christians are over, and those of the nation of Israel are still in celebration. Israel, we give you our promise, will not be destroyed, but what is in the minds of those that oppose could cause the greatest devastation, and, Doctor, it is tragic, but your country will not intervene. This is Dr. Puharich. For the next 2 weeks, the period that Tom had said when they were in Ossining would be the most critical. Andrija, John and Phyllis remained in Tiberias, ostensibly tourists, and followed Tom's instruction to stand in the Lake of Galilee and face the nation of Syria and pray from the heart for certain periods each day. You are in a very special place, Tom told them. This area where you are now, it's special because of the Nazarene, because of Jesus. We have explained to you about the energy field that is Megiddo, and the spokes that go out, and the pockets of energy at the extensions. Well, this place is one of the extensions. In this area, the Nazarene performed many miracles. Remember who he was and who you are, and remember that he promised there would be those that would perform more and stronger miracles. The incognito of the successors of the Nazarene was impeccable during this visit. When they were not meditating, praying, or communicating with Tom, they looked and behaved exactly like tourists. John went water skiing on Lake Galilee with the hotel lifeguard, a 31-year-old Israeli who, as an immigrant some years ago, had boldly adopted the double eponyme Israel Carmel. Israel was intense, aggressive, athletic, and intelligent. He became a friend of the trio, accompanied them on sightseeing expeditions in the area, and introduced them to friends of his in Tiberias. The relationship was strengthened when one afternoon he joined them in their 3 o'clock meditation, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, though of course they did not tell him the purpose of it. Tom told them on the 25th of March 1975, "In your meditations today, you have not succeeded in averting the war threat, but you have achieved delay until 3 days after your 28th. And may we say to you that if you can prevent difficulties for the nation of Israel through the month of your July, then the nation of Israel will stand firm forever." Which was the second indication that they had they weren't going to be based back in Ossining as soon as they had thought. They were not going to be back in Ossining as soon as they thought. On the following day, the 26th of March 1975, there was apparently danger once again of Israel embarking on a suicidal, preemptive attack strategy. Tom told the trio, "It is important for you in your next meditations to pray and to love and to give to those that are in authority in the nation of Israel the strength to be wise in their decisions. They feel that they are in a situation where they will have no choice but to be aggressive and aggressors. It must not happen, and we will tell you the truth of another situation. If it should come to pass that the people of this nation should ever come near the point of their total destruction, they will not only remain until they are no longer, but they will also take the rest of the planet Earth with them. They will release 9 missiles. It is important that this does not be permitted. The children of the nation of Israel have in their hearts the knowledge of who they are, but with this knowledge they are determined that before they will have to kiss the feet of others, they will eliminate all their people. They know that if the country of our doctor is not on their side, there is no hope for their existence, and they are prepared to take the planet with them. They have 9 missiles situated in 3 different areas, all pointing in directions to cause the greatest devastation." This was consistent with reports that appeared in the press shortly after that Israel had achieved nuclear capability. Tension was maintained at a high pitch throughout the next 5 or 6 days, both by the information Tom conveyed and by the news emanating from the newspapers and from radio and television. The latter did not corroborate the former, for Tom's information had to do with events and decisions that would not be available to the media anyway. But suspense ran at a parallel pitch in the two sources of information. Among the Israelis, there was a growing sense that war was imminent and inevitable, and indeed, many of them seemed to be spoiling for it. Communications with Tom over these days tended to be brief and to the point, for the opposition was apparently trying to use the opportunity to put its oar in, and there was a need for energy conservation in order to maximize the output for preventing an escalation of hostile posturings and plotting into open war. In addition to continually reassuring the trio that their energy augmented by that of the troops at Ossining was proving effective, and exhorting them to stand firm in their faith and not relax their efforts, Tom vouchsafed some political information. Since Kissinger's return to Washington, the US had decided to abandon Israel to her fate. In Syria, the government was in cahoots with the PLO, and a plot had been concocted to unite the Arab nations against Israel by engineering a political assassination which would look as if it had been done by Israelis. He wasn't named specifically, but there were hints that the intended victim of this plot was King Hussein of Jordan. All over Israel, including in Tiberias, there were Arab infiltrators, and they were being organized to strike simultaneously in order to throw the Israelis into disarray just before the main military offensive started. For the next 6 or 7 days, Tom said on the 28th of March 75, "We are walking on eggs." There was a situation of supreme crisis coming which would demand of them a great concerted effort, and even if it were passed successfully, it would not mean the end of their work here, for the situation would remain serious until July 75. On the 30th of March, Tom said that the moment of crisis would probably come at 9 o'clock the following evening, and that from 2 o'clock in the afternoon they should be in prayer for an hour and should communicate at 9 o'clock. This would be the last effort the Ossinian troops would be required to participate in, for after it they would not be in a condition to continue, so they would be free to disband. So at 8:45 on 31st of March 75, D-Day as they called it, Andrija, John and Phyllis assembled in a hotel in Tiberias which overlooked one of the most contentious territories in the world, the Golan Heights. It was an apparently peaceful night, with a near full moon riding over distant Safed and casting a bridge of light across the lake, but the assembled trio shared a sense of foreboding and of the great solemnity of the occasion. Phyllis went into trance quickly, and when her body stiffened and her forearms rose, and Tom announced in a weak and halting voice, "We are here," Andrija said, "Welcome, Tom. We very much wanted to be with you in this fateful hour in human affairs, and we would like to do whatever we can to help. Can you advise us what the state of affairs is?" During the session, Tom was rather less coherent than usual, and there were long pauses before he answered questions and between his statements. But the reason for this, they soon learned, was that he was simultaneously eavesdropping on a meeting of Arab leaders who were debating whether to give the order for missiles to be launched against Israel. It was some time before he answered Andreja's opening question. Then he said, "At this time, if there would be but 6 decisions, and there are 4 that are affirmative and 2 that are not, we are sorry. You will bear with us when we must hesitate." "Yes, of course," Andrija said. "We understand." It has come to the notice of those that are across the water from where you are that there is a difficulty in, what is the word? It is not machinery, but they're having difficulty. It is for us and for you a good situation, but there are those who say that what is left in balance should be pushed. I take it there's a decisions meeting going on, Andrija said. Yes, at this moment. We will say this to you. There's much consternation and there's much stumping. Is Israel aware of this moment of peril? Andrija asked. Tom said, they have of this knowledge. We must pray. Shall we pray to give stability and strength? Yes. The nation of Israel will not push the button without notification. We are in a precarious time. We will hold each other. Andrija and John each took one of Phyllis's ice-cold hands and joined their own to complete the circuit. Andrija whispered into the microphone for the record. The time is exactly 9 p.m. local time. Tom said, we will send strength to those of the nation of Israel. We may hold but 4 minutes. We will in truth, how do you say? We will have won a round. The three sat in silence with joined hands for what seemed a long time. And then Tom delivered a speech, slower and more hesitatingly than usual. Tom. In these moments when we are together, we ask you to call upon all your reserves, all your strength, all your love and your compassion. Convert your frustrations into harmony. Bring out your understanding of all that is around you and of each other, and spread it abroad and give it to the children of the nation of Israel. Plant in the minds of those that oppose the notion of Israel a seed, so that they may step out of their hate. It is important at this time that those that oppose be in confusion, and it is sad that in the confusion they cause more confusion. But it is the only thing that will keep them in separate doors. We would say this to you for the work and the strength of the three of you, that if this night passes in peace, then those that oppose this nation of Israel will ask within 10 to 17 days for a meeting with Dr. Kissinger, and this will bring great hope. But until that time, we are on eggs. We pray for peace and that all of our strength be permitted to be used to the maximum to blanket this area and these people with love and with understanding, and to bring them out of the bondage of their minds. This was followed by a long wait, and then Tom announced success. Egypt is dismantled. Lebanon is ineffective. And 4 in Syria are non-functional. With the others, there's difficulty. Another suspenseful silence was followed by the announcement that brought a great surge of relief to both Andrija and John. We have passed. Are you holding in Syria now? Andrija asked. There are 3 missiles functioning. Have you not neutralized those yet? With only 3, they will not attempt. We have passed. Do you understand that if we had not succeeded, you would be with us? Andrija laughed. Yes, we were very aware of that. Though I think it would be a pleasure to be with you, to tell the truth. You cannot return. You have not completed. No, we realize that, and of course we're anxious to complete our task on Earth, Andrija said. We must tell you that in 3 of your days, there will be those fringes that in their anger will cause difficulty. Your energies may be used at that time to thin out the fringes. Andrija said, okay, we'll be available for that mopping up operation. And I stop this chapter 8 here, because it was quite a tremendous information, I think, and I shall listen to myself again now. Have a good 9th of August, and the next one, the end of chapter 8, is coming as soon as possible.